Three, two, one. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Afro Elite. Today is going to be a little bit different. Today we have a returning guest, Dowie, and Dowie is going to question how strong my stance is on reparations for the foundational Black Americans, why we need it, and he's going to challenge me with opposing views. Now I'm going to let him speak for now as I start sharing all this stuff, all this good stuff. So now you can go.
All right, it's good to be here. Good to be back. This is fun. I've been kind of cooking this one up in the books for a minute. I thought it'd be super fun. I gotta say, first off, I'm for reparations. All right, let there be no confusion about that. That is something I'm down for. I'm literally just playing devil's advocate here. I feel like the best way to explore ideas is to have to defend them. That's the best way. That's when one can really get to know your beliefs and your stances. So I thought this would be fun to do. It'd be a way for meeting real people. I like debating. Usually, I debate nonsensical stuff that doesn't matter, like comic book heroes and stuff. I like debating real stuff too. So that's what I get out of it. Plus, help the boy, the bro's channel. I gotta help the boy, and then you guys get to know more about him and his stances when it comes to this particular issue. I'm sure he's talked about it in many of his videos already, but it's always good to see really, dig deep down in there. So I'm going to be picking a lot of arguments, or I have arguments that I've set aside that I've seen people make against reparations, as well as some maybe plot holes that I found in mine. And we're going to go down that rabbit hole and, get in there and see what's under there. We're going to Wonderland, kids. We're going to Wonderland.
Okay. I'm pretty much done with doing. Oh boy, no, I did not mean to do that. I'm pretty much done with doing most of my sharing right now. So, oh, we have a commenter. Emma McNeil, how you doing? So, as we're letting people come in, I just want to reiterate, even though he's going to be challenging my beliefs on reparations, he is not against reparations, and I think that this is a good topic too because when you argue for something, you're always going to have people who oppose your arguments. And you have to be educated on the stance of your argument. So if you're for reparations, but you're kind of like lean like, I don't know, maybe this video might clear everything up for you. Or if somebody challenges your beliefs, you'll be able to articulate that in a very educated manner. So so we can start with the questioning. First off, my stance is I am definitely 100% for it. I'm solid, 10 toes down for it. I'm definitely for it. Um, but we can start with whatever question you have down.
All right. Let's get into it. Got my notes pulled up on this screen here. So
Please.
let's start off with I guess let's lay the foundations here. Now you're for reparations. Well, in particular, you're for reparations for slavery and the effects that slavery has had on us in the following decade, century afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So, and also to follow up, you are specifically for reparations for African Americans. It's you don't. That's not. You're not. That's you're not too concerned with other groups. This is specifically for African Americans, right?
Yes. For a
Okay.
very specific reason. Yes. That's correct.
So, one popular argument that many people like, this is probably the most general one, and this is probably the easiest question here for you. That I think you can have an easy tie with this one. It's the argument that many people will make is that reparations is something that if we give it to one group, we have to give it to every other group that the U.S. has wronged as a whole. They will say, if we give it for slavery, reparations for slavery to descendants of slaves, then we have to give it to the reparations to the Native Americans. We have to give reparations to the Chinese Americans, the Italian Americans, and so on and so forth down to basically any race that's been mass discriminated against. And they will use what that is often used to dilute the argument of reparations. So
Okay.
what is your answer, your reply to someone who says, well, then we have to give it to everybody, and that's not going to go anywhere?
Okay. My thing is, you first off, it's not right to say, okay, if I try to correct one wrong, I would have to try to correct every wrong, so I'm not going to correct anything. I feel like that's a flawed way of looking at any situation in any problem. Another thing, too, objectively speaking, black people are in a different boat than everybody else. So to say if the most aggrieved group of people deserve reparations, and you would have to give it to groups of people who are less aggrieved than black people. I feel like that's a flawed thing too, because you're comparing two different major issues. That's like you committing a bunch of crimes and you're saying, okay, well, if I do punishment for if you burn somebody's house down, you say, okay, if I pay for your house to get burned down, then I'm gonna have to atone for all my lesser sins, all the vandalism. Let's say you burn somebody's house down, and then you broke somebody's car window. You say, well, if I try to fix your house, then I would have to fix all the windows I broke. So I'm not gonna do anything. Well, clearly the house being burned down is a much bigger issue, and the the car window being broken into is a smaller issue. You can't say if I have to fix this major issue, I'll have to fix these smaller issues, so I'm not going to fix it. Secondly, too, and I feel like is very very important, when we argue reparations, we have to understand what the reparations was for. So in order to understand what reparations was for, we have to understand what the purpose of slavery was. And the purpose of slavery was to maldistribute the wealth from the black slaves to white society. Even if you're not a slave owner or your family didn't own slaves, you still benefited from it because slavery enriched the society for white people. All of those, all of the free labor went to the white society. So you still benefited from that. So reparations, the purpose of reparations is so we can start distributing the resources that was maldistributed to white society, because white society got the whole West got rich. The banks, the insurance companies, all that stuff was built off of the backs of slaves. Slaves got nothing for it. These other groups of people who, and I'm not trying to say they weren't discriminated against, I'm not trying to say they didn't go through anything, but these other groups of people who came to America did not really contribute to the building of America. They weren't subject to the maldistribution of the wealth that black people were faced. They faced some hardships, but America was not built on the backs of other groups. It was specifically built on the backs of slaves. And to be honest, all these other groups who are immigrants benefit from that. They came here after the foundation was done. Another thing too is, and I know I'm gonna wrap this up so you can get to your next question, but another thing too is a lot of these other groups have already gotten some form of reparations. A lot of these groups who deserve reparations have gotten some form of reparations, like the Chinese people in the internment camps, the Chinese people in the internment camps, the Native Americans with their reserved lands and not paying taxes and grants and things like that. They, a lot of these other groups who America has wronged has been getting reparations. Black people for slavery has been the only group who has not been getting reparations. So that is why I say it is an illegitimate stance to say if I can't do it for everybody, then I'm not going to do it for anybody.
So you mentioned in your rebuttal that other groups, these other groups, they have gotten some reparations. And in particular, one thing that's super important to the follow up, is that you mentioned, America is built off the backs of slaves. I almost said the slacks of babes. America is built off the back of slaves. So what would you say to someone who would have the argument that Native Americans, they were here first and they were genocided, and then the country was taken from them. So the argument that a lot of people I've seen make is that because of this, even though they've gotten something back, it's not it doesn't make up for what happened, not even close. So the argument is that their right to reparations supersedes African American rights to reparations.
Okay. Well, like I said, there are always aggrieved groups, and I do feel for what they went through. However, what history has led us to believe that these Native Americans, and now when we think of Native Americans, we automatically think of the red skin um, looking Native Americans, but there were actually black Native Americans as well. And when I say black Native Americans, they were actual black people, what we would be considered black people who were here before the British came here with the slave trade. They were here about almost, I think, a century before, and this is documented that they were here at least a century before the British came here and started the slave trade in the 1600s. So you have black Native Americans as well. Another thing too is the Native Americans really did not contribute greatly to the foundational building of United States of America. Because we have to realize that this country, the country we're on today, was not America. This country was not America before slavery built it to be America. Even when it was the 13 colonies, it was not that, it was just kind of just land. Now, of course, we had territories and things like that, but it was kind of just land.
Yep.
The slaves came and we built the country. We built the economics, the everything, the government from start to finish by ourselves. The red skinned, and I'm not trying to say that as a slur or anything, but the Native Americans, or who we view as the Native Americans, they did not contribute to that. As a matter of fact, they actually participated in the transatlantic slave trade. So the Native Americans would be the ones who would be what we would call like the overseers or the bounty hunters, who would catch runaway slaves and who would try to snitch on runaway slaves. So the Native Americans did contribute negatively to the slave trade. So I don't necessarily feel super bad for them, and considering the fact that black people, when they were signing the treaties and everything like that, a lot of the treaties were included with black people, and Native Americans kind of filtered black people out. Native Americans did not want the black slaves to be a part of their treaties as well. I also feel anytime we talk about Native Americans and the wrongdoings that they've suffered, like the Trail of Tears and everything, you don't hear the conversation switch from it's about Native Americans, and then you hear a Native American person say, okay, well, what about the slave trade? You don't hear them say that. Whenever we're talking about Native Americans, it stays on Native Americans. But when we're talking about slavery, it switches over from, okay, well, what about Native Americans too? The reason why I say that the reparations have to be strict and not include the Native, what they would consider the Native Americans, which nowadays is just white people. Nowadays, they're white people who paid $5 back in the day on the census. That's why they call them the $5 Indians. So they're not
Yep.
really Native Americans. You have the Native Americans who did not build the country, and the slaves who did build the country. The reason why we're getting reparations is because all of the wealth was maldistributed. Now you could say, okay, you took their land. There are some Native Americans who do have some form of reparations. You have some form of reparations. Black people didn't get anything. So you can't say, okay, well, we gave them reparations before, and we're gonna have to give them reparations again before we give it to black people. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
They're kind of cool as far as I'm concerned. They're good.
Yeah, I get what you mean. And like just to clarify, it's not that you're saying that these other groups don't deserve reparations. It's just that it doesn't supersede African American reparations.
Yes, yeah, I would say that. I would
Okay.
say there are specific instances, and you could give reparations to descendants of those instances. But I would say, as far as any other group deserving reparations over black people, and I know Jane Elliott makes that argument that reparations should go to Native Americans first before black people. I totally disagree with that because the Native American is not like this was a well-founded, wealthy country that the British came and stole. This was kind of just like open land. Even though the Native Americans were living here on the open land, and we hear about the Native Americans, like I said before, a lot of black people, a lot of the what we would consider African Americans or foundational Black Americans, are descendants from Native Americans as well.
Checking one
So
out, boy.
if we do give something to Native Americans, you would have to include black people in that.
So, and it's a good thing that you mentioned about Native Americans actively participating in the transatlantic slave trade, because my next question for you is: in 2001, an American a writer by the name of David Horowitz, he owns a think tank called the Freedom Tank or something. I don't know, something American-y about freedom and liberty or whatever. He wrote a paper giving around, I think, 10 reasons as to why reparations is a bad for blacks is a bad idea. Uh, Literally the title of this. I will send it to you after the show too because it's kind of wild. This is where a lot of my questions will come from.
Okay.
Uh,
And so
the,
I don't know what he's going to ask me. I have no idea what he's going to ask me. So it's not like this is a scripted thing where he asks me this question and I answer it. I have no idea what he's going to ask me. So
yeah,
I'm
this is
letting the audience know that.
yeah, this is not scripted at all. I did have these questions lined up, and we talked about it a little bit before, but we just decided to do it literally on a whim right now. So the first question he asks, or the first reason he poses, is that there is no single group that was clearly responsible for the crime of slavery. That Black Africans and Arabs were responsible for enslaving the ancestors of African Americans. So one of the questions he asks is that are reparations to be paid by their descendants too, as in the Arab and descendants and the Black African
Okay.
descendant.
My bad if I interrupted you. Are you
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I was just gonna paraphrase it. So the question is, what do you have to say to the fact that he says that because that you can't pin it on one group, that you shouldn't pin it to anybody, basically.
well
And do you think that the descendants of Arabs and Black Africans, African American, the descendant of slaves, uh, uh, reparations as well?
Well, okay. I think all of this traces back to the fact that this, if we he said we can't trace it back to a single group. I disagree with that. We can trace the American slavery back to the American government. We're not talking about hundreds of years ago before the British came, before Columbus or whatever. Like his argument would be, okay, well, we would have to, if we're going to atone for slavery, we would have to go all the way to the beginning of when slavery was ever started, when slavery was invented. No, we're talking about the fact that this standing government, the Constitution that was built off of slavery that still exists today, this standing government has been built off of slavery. So we need reparations from this government, the American government. Now, I'm not opposed to us getting reparations from the descendants of the people who had black people enslaved back then. I'm not opposed to that at all, but I feel like that's very deflective to say you can't trace it back to one person. Yeah, you can trace it back. We're tracing this back to when America was built, the building of America, because we live in America. We live in America. America was built off of our work, so we are going to get paid for, or the descendants of the people who did that work should be getting paid. This has nothing to do with the Arabs. This has nothing to do with the Africans or anything like that. If we were to go back there, we can do that after we get the reparations for America.
Yep. For some reason, my audio is doubled in your stream. Uh, I'm not sure.
Because I'm not hearing anything doubling. Audience, are you guys hearing him double? It's always some audio thing. Are you guys hearing him? Uh, okay. Well, as you're working on that, I'm gonna just reiterate my statement.
Okay.
My statement about him saying you can't blame one single person. I hear people say that. Oh well, they had slaves. They had slaves. They had slaves. This is not. We're not arguing reparations because of the moral injustice of slavery. Even though it is a moral injustice, we're arguing reparations because of the maldistribution of wealth. If slavery was built in Africa, slavery was way different. I don't like the argument. Well, Africa has slaves, so it's kind of like the same thing. It was not the same thing at all. If Africa was built off of the slaves, then their government should be responsible for the reparations of that people, of the descendants of slaves. I don't like too is the fact that you're saying they want to make it seem like it was the slave masters, and then you don't have slave masters alive today to really pay that. You have you there's no one group, there's a lot of groups. He's right about that. There's a lot of groups. The American government, every part of the American economy started with the slave trade. Trading, the insurance companies, because slaves were considered property, so we were insured, in us being paid for, like car insurance. They would pay their slaves like car insurance. Us being insured built a lot of these insurance companies that are still standing today. A lot of the banks that are today, like Chase Bank, they got their startup through slavery. A lot of the hospitals that are built today, they got there through slavery. So all of these billion-dollar corporations can trace their roots back to the maldistribution of wealth due to slavery. So it's time to distribute that wealth properly in the American government. Because
Yep.
it would be a different argument if American government had us enslaved, and this is centuries ago. Now it's a totally new government, totally new people. This is still the same government.
Okay. So before I follow up, are you? Do you have me coming out of like maybe a second source as well or something? Because like they're saying your voice isn't doubling up, but mine is.
Okay. No, I do. Hold on. Let me see something. Is your voice still doubling up now?
I can't hear it like that. Because of the delay in the stream, so I can't really hear it. I can only know from the stream. Baki's watching, and he messaged me and told me that my voice is coming through like twice.
Well, there was a mixer on, and I just turned it off. So if you can ask him to check again.
Okay, if my voice is still doubling up, can somebody let me know? Uh,
Yeah, can you guys
wouldn't
text
hear
me
this. Yeah.
like that?
Okay. So let's see. He said the audio's messed up, but there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm gonna wait and see if that did it.
Okay. And as you're doing that, for the people who are watching, can you guys please leave a like and share, because I think this is a very interesting topic. If you guys can leave a like and share, and eventually I'm going to open up some phone lines, so I'm going to have people call in, and people can call in with their opinions on reparations. People can weigh into what they think about the subject of reparations. And somebody says, yeah, the audio is messed up.
Baki just messaged me. He said it's good now. That fixed it.
Okay, well there is a delay. Okay, so if it's good now, let's move on with the questions.
Okay, so to follow up with what you said, not so much as a question, it's me just sliding my own personal tooth in there. I completely agree with you. What the Arabs, first off, what the Arabs and the Black Africans did with their slavery, that's on them. But we don't live with them. Those governments do not govern us. The American government does. So the American government is who needs to answer to us first and foremost. Secondly, what the slavery that you mentioned, the slavery that they did was completely different from the slavery and the horrors of the slavery. The sub-Saharan slave trade, completely different. Slaves were still allowed to have jobs, families, houses. They could assume office and government, everything like that. Completely different thing. They didn't strip away their basic human rights. Uh, so it is like you mentioned. Those were some very good points. Uh, so I guess following up with that, the second reason he gives kind of adds right back to that is what if that because as you mentioned, there's no single group that's clearly responsible for crimes of slavery, which is number one reason. His second reason, kind of following up on that, is that no single group benefited from its fruits exclusively. And then he goes on to make the argument tied into that if slavery created wealth for America, then slavery created wealth for Black America, and that very few whites profited from slavery. Is the argument he makes. That one in, I believe, five white Americans were slave owners back in the day, and that why should their descendants owe the debt?
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay. I'm allow you to finish your statement.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna break this one up just a little bit because that was like 2 in 1. So right off the rip, I feel like in your original statement, you really answered the general statement that no one clear group benefited from it, the act of slavery. I feel like, but you can follow up on that one real quick.
Okay, when they say no one group benefited, yeah, he's actually correct. The entire world, if we're going to be honest, benefited from it. It built the West, and then what the West did with everything else, it benefited a large part of the world. You can say no one group did it, as if we can trace it back to a single group. We can say the American government did it. It's the American government whether they started it or not, they perpetuated it. They were responsible for it. They participated in it, and they did benefit from it. So I disagree with him saying no one group did it. And for his argument to say a lot of, and I hear this argument a lot too, where they say, well, white people didn't really own slaves like that. Every white person wasn't a slave owner or whatever. That doesn't matter. That every white person wasn't a slave owner. First off, majority of white people back during the days of slavery fully condoned and fully agreed with slavery. You have pictures of a black person hanging, and you have like hundreds of white people gathering around with black people burning alive and stuff like that, and they all sit there and watch for postcards. Majority, if not 100%, of all white people back during that day condoned, fully agreed with it. They benefited from it because slavery set up the foundation for everything else. When a slave owner, when a slave owner had his slaves and that made him rich, he was able to trade, he was able to have businesses, employ other people, and he was able to make the environment around him rich through our labor. We built buildings, government, and stuff like that. Like I said, the banks. Anybody who has a bank account benefits from slavery, technically. Especially back then. Anybody who was able to go to a hospital, anybody who was able to pretty much do anything was benefiting from slavery. So you don't have to be a slave owner necessarily, because the American government in the American country benefited from slavery, and all of these other groups benefited from the American country. So everybody technically does benefit from it. And to say it's helped Black Americans, we built it, and it has not helped. It has disproportionately helped white Americans and other groups of Americans before us, and we're the ones who are most deserving of it. We haven't been given what you guys have been given. We haven't been given, well, I say you guys, not meaning you specifically. We Black Americans who built America have not been given the resources that white Americans have. It's still, even though we benefit from the work of our ancestors because we live in the land, majority of the wealth that they built belongs in the white, solidly in the white community. So whether your ancestors benefited from slavery, all of the riches that was in the white community, all white people were able to take a part of.
So, following up on that, because I'm sure you've heard the argument, that specific argument too, that barely any white people owned slaves back in the day. Not many white people owned slaves back in the day. Uh, the argument a lot of people make as well is that slavery, or the argument that a lot of people make as well is, why should the descendants of slave owners have to pay for reparations for the sins of the fathers? Why should the sins of the father be passed on to the son?
Well, here's the thing. When we make the argument for reparations, I don't think necessarily anybody is specifically saying every white person has to, like, it comes out of their check or whatever. It can come out of the American government. And the American government should pay it and has the money. It can come out of Chase Bank. It can come out of anything that was built off of the backs of slavery. And nobody is saying specifically all other non-black people have to take a portion out of their check to pay reparations. Now, if it has to be like that, and I don't think it does, because they're cutting stimulus checks left and right, unplanned, unplanned money that they're giving that doesn't break the economy, that the American government has trillions of dollars that they did not plan to spend, they wound up spending. So the American government does have it, and I feel like they should be the ones paying it. But if the descendants of, like, okay, like how you were saying, if you're the descendant of a slave owner, why should I pay? I had nothing to do with it. But the thing is, you still benefit from it. A descendant of a slave owner still benefits from their grandfather's work, still benefits from their grandfather owning slaves. They had generational wealth that got passed down to them. They don't complain about the fact that they have a Chase Bank account, and Chase Bank was built by slavery. The fact that they can have insurance, and the insurance companies were built by slavery, or the medical field was built best. The medical field was built off of the backs of slavery. They're not complaining about they still being recipients of the benefits of slavery, but they're saying, okay, since I didn't do it, I shouldn't have to pay. That's like somebody saying, if I was to rob, and I'm gonna give this example because I hear this argument a lot. If somebody was to rob a bank and give the money to you, you know they robbed the bank, but you did not participate, you didn't help at all. No, no way, period. Let's say you didn't even condone them robbing a bank, but you still take the money. You take the money and you buy yourself a car or you buy yourself a house. And somebody comes up to you and says, okay, well, that house that you bought was bought off of a robbed bank, so you have to give the house back or you have to give the car back. You can't say, well, I didn't rob the bank, so why should I have to give the money back? It wasn't my responsibility for the bank being robbed. I had nothing to do with the bank being robbed. Yeah, but that money is still the bank's money. You still benefit from the fact that the bank was robbed.
Yep.
So it's like that. It's like that.
That's a good analogy. What about as when the Civil War was largely fought over slavery.
Mm-hmm.
The South wanted to keep it. North did not, to oversimplify it.
Mm-hmm.
Several white Union soldiers died in that war.
Mm-hmm.
Why should the descendants of people who laid down their lives fighting against slavery have to pay reparations as well?
Okay, well, let's look at why the Civil War started. And a lot of people make the arguments, and I understand because this is what you're being taught in history. This is a little history lesson. The Civil War was not started because a bunch of white people felt it immoral to keep slaves. The white people in the North had this, it was immoral to have slaves, so they like, okay, let's get rid of slaves. A lot of people like to mention Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and that ended slavery because he didn't like slavery. majority of white people, even back during the Civil War, they didn't have an issue with slavery at all. There was slavery in the North, just because there were just because there were some, I'm sorry that comment threw me off. Just because there were some states that were free, there was still slavery in the North. New York was the biggest slave state. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think that all the slavery was down in the South. New York was actually a lot of the slaves came from New York. They were slave trading and all that stuff up there. So they started because the South was pretty much way too powerful. The South could pretty much branch off and make their own government. They were using their slaves for they were political purposes. So they were disproportionate, like the term 3/5 of a human being, what the slaves were called. They were doing that because when it came for voting and government, they would count their slaves, and that the South was way more powerful than the North. So what they had to do was either everybody had slaves everywhere, or nobody could have slaves. So that's why they had to get rid of their slaves. It's not like the Union were these superheroes who loved slavery. Their ancestors fought in a war and they died, and that's unfortunate. There were a lot of black people who fought in the Civil War and died. They make it seem like black people were just sitting on the sidelines, biting their teeth, hoping that the white people would come and save them. The Civil War wouldn't have been won if it wasn't for black people joining the Civil War and fighting against the Confederacy. Now you say, why should they have to pay? Because at the end of the day, they still benefit from it. A lot of the descendants of the people who were in the Union and who fought and died, they were getting checks from the government for the death of their family member. There was the last, I think she was like the great granddaughter of somebody who died in the Civil War. She just stopped getting her checks from the Civil War. I think in like 2009 or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but they were getting compensation for their dead family members. And at the end of the day, most importantly, they still benefit from slavery because they benefit from living in America. Everything in America, from the banks to the schools to the hospitals to the insurance companies to the government itself. Anytime the government gives you government assistance, that's because of slavery. Anytime the government helps you out in any way, that's because of slavery. All government jobs, all state jobs, that is built off of slavery. All of that stuff can be traced back to slavery. So the fact that you benefit from it does not the fact that your grandparents died off of it or whoever died off of it, that does not scratch away the fact that you still benefit from it today.
Yep, yep. If you see me like I'm typing, because I'm kind of like typing down what you say as you say it,
Okay.
because I'm taking notes on what you say. I'm taking notes.
Yeah,
It's
no
taking me
notice
to school.
live. I'm
Uh,
not sure why.
all right, all right. So, as you know, today America is a bit of a melting pot of a country. We've got people from all walks of life coming into this country. Even today, I think no country on the earth gets as many immigrants as America does. I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. I still think we get the most people immigrating to the country, more than any other country. A lot of these people did come from groups that did not benefit from slavery. However, they still, paying the taxes. Is it fair? Why do they
You see me
have
like
to
I'm
pay
typing because
for
I'm.
reparations?
Okay, can you restate the question? I was checking out.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Oh,
So
and can you
America.
guys leave a like? If you're just coming in, can you please leave a like and share this very important topic right here?
So America is a melting pot of a country. We got people from
Mm-hmm.
all different walks of life, all over the world, coming in here at a faster rate than probably any other country in the world. I think at one point Canada exceeded us, but in terms of people coming into the country, I'm not sure about that. I don't know, but I think we're still number one. So why should some of these people immigrating into the country who maybe come from groups that did not benefit from slavery, they still pay taxes? Why do they have to pay? Why should their taxes go towards paying reparations?
Because they still benefit from slavery. At the end of the day, if you are living in America, You are benefiting from the fact that you get to come to a land, the fact that America even exists. That because the thing is that nobody is going to come from a land that's great to a land that's worse. You left whatever country you're coming from to America, whether it's for education, job opportunities, some rights or something like that. You left and you came to America because there was something about America that you liked that was not there from wherever you came from. There was some opportunity, there was something that you wanted in America. And what you wanted in America can be traced back to slavery. The fact that people get to come over here and they get to get government programs, the fact that people get to come over here and the fact that they get to have a job, a house, a bank account, go to school, go to the hospital, all of those things are traced back to the fact that America was built off of slavery. So you living in America, you do benefit from slavery. The fact that you came over here means that there was something in America that you liked, that you wanted to live in America for. And that was built off of slavery. So you're saying your taxes shouldn't pay. Why should that people's taxes pay for that? Because you're living in America and America owes a debt. So for you to live in America and pay taxes, your taxes is paying off of America's debt. And I'm not trying to go off on you, but I don't like the argument that um why should my taxes have to go for this? Why should my taxes have to go for this? You don't really hear a lot of arguments on why should my taxes be paid for this or this or this or this. Like for instance, the military, different programs, different this, different that, different this and that. You only really hear the why should my taxes have to come from for America? Why should they have to come for the people who built America? It has to come to the people who built America because America owes a debt to those people. And you are living in America, you benefit off of America. So indirectly, you benefit off of that debt. Indirectly, you participated by coming here and becoming an American citizen. You are connecting yourself to that debt.
Yep. Okay. So essentially, what you're saying, just to summarize it all up, is that because America is built off the backs of slavery, there's basically it is rare to find something in this country that exists because that didn't come from slavery. So
Mm-hmm.
because of that, anybody coming to the country, they and benefiting from that, any of these opportunities, they owe slavery. They owe reparations. Uh, so and from that extension, doesn't the same apply to Native Americans, who, because it is the genocide of the Native American people that started this country, or that this country was started on, that one could argue that they are owed reparations for the exact same reasons.
Okay. Well, like I said too, if you want to say that, you would have to be honest about who the real Native Americans are, because a lot of the Native Americans, to be honest, most of the slaves in the transatlantic slave trade didn't come to North America. A lot of them went to South America. It was less than 10% of the actual slaves. You could go to a museum and study this. Less than 10% of the actual slaves from the slave trade, even though there were hundreds and thousands, less than 10% of them were actually in North America. So so a lot of the black people that you see here, they're not like this. They're not the people who came from the boat to America. They were mixed. There were black people who are here, and this has been documented by Spanish explorers and conquerors. There were black people who were here before the British came here. So if you want to say, okay, the Native Americans deserve something, black people deserve that too, because black people can be traced back to our Native American heritage. And to say that as well, Native Americans already got reservations. They got casinos, tax free money. they're exempt from taxes. So the American government has been trying to rectify their grievance, rectify their wrongdoings to the Native Americans and not to black people. And Native Americans did participate in slavery. I think that's the biggest thing there, because we're saying, okay, these aggrieved groups, black people are aggrieved, Native Americans are aggrieved. Native Americans, if we're going to be completely honest with it, Native Americans owe black people stuff. Because in the treaties where black people in the freedmen banks and everything like that, when black people were supposed to be a part of their treaties and Native Americans filtered black people out, Native Americans have benefited from things that we were supposed to be a part of as a foundation of black Americans were supposed to be a part of, that we weren't being able to be a part of. They did participate in slavery. And this isn't like a conspiracy theory. If you go to a museum, if you go to a library, you can find these things out yourself. So if we're going to go that route, then the Native Americans do owe black Americans something.
Okay. So that's a good answer. I really like that answer. Uh, all right. So now here comes one on this his 10 list. This is where things might get a little dicey. And dicey, I mean, as in, you might find these a little infuriating.
Okay.
So we're going to jump right to his last one. We're getting into the best one right away, in my opinion. All right. His claim right here, do the claim. The reparations claim that African Americans make today is a separatist idea that sets African Americans against the very nation that gave them their freedom.
Oh, wow.
So he goes on to say that blacks were here before the Mayflower, which, no disputing that. And that who is more American than the descendants of African slaves? So he does give some credit here in this statement to saying that, like you said, the country basically was black before it was white. But then he goes on to say, because of that the demanding of reparations is uniquely anti-American, basically. He's saying that it's for a separatist idea, nationalist idea, and that because the country is built off the backs of our ancestors, we have an enormous stake in this country, which is true. We do have an enormous stake in this country. However, he says that to go to demand reparations for it is against the very heart of this country that we built. So in effect, I guess you could say at least one of the ideas he kind of teases in this this document, is that by demanding reparations, it's kind of like we're doing disservice to the history of torment that our ancestors have been through, that we're belittling their sacrifice, because as if to ask for reparations is to spit in the face of everything they've done and everything they believed. This one is a little wild.
He means like the white people who were in charge of it, like the founding fathers or something.
No, the sum of the argument is that if we demand reparations, then it's basically as if our ancestors who were enslaved for nothing. They suffered for nothing. It's a weird, strange moral argument.
Okay.
So basically, you can go ahead, because I don't even know I can't even summarize this into a question. This is more of a statement that kind of out there. So go ahead, kill it.
Okay. Here. Okay. Let me take a break. Lord, let me take a break. Where do I want to start with that one? I'm gonna start with the fact that I will agree that is anti-American. Now, America is supposed to be the land of the free, right? So for him to say that's anti-American would go against the Constitution. But to be honest, I do believe that it is anti-American reparations for slavery, because America still approves of slavery, and America still condones slavery largely. Most of America still condones it, and most of America still approves it. What I find out flaws with that argument is because they never say the Boston Tea Party was like anti-American. The American Revolution was, well, even if you want to say that's pro America, you would never say the Civil War, because America likes to to pat themselves on the back for the Civil War, right? But you don't hear the Civil War was anti-American. You don't hear these things being done that's anti-American. Um, Even slavery. After slavery, the Jim Crow, the Black laws, all the other things up until the Civil Rights Movement, you don't hear that argument being said. Oh, those are anti-Americans. So how is paying reparations anti-Americans? Even though the fact that America has literally paid reparations to every other group. America has paid reparations to every other group. It doesn't make sense that that's anti-American. For his statement to say our ancestors would have died for no reason, they would have died for nothing. They did die for nothing. They didn't die for our benefit. I would say that they didn't die for our benefit. They died for the country, and the
Hmm.
country has done wrong by the people, the descendants of the people they died for. And that is why we're fighting for this. So, if anything, this would be the most American thing. This would be against what majority of America feels, because majority of America condones slavery still to this day. Majority of America doesn't really have a problem with slavery. Just ask anybody their opinion on reparations. Majority of America still does not approve of reparations, so majority of America still condones that. For you to say that slavery is an issue, essentially you're saying that for you to say reparations is an issue, essentially you're saying slavery was not an issue, because you can't have a problem with the action, but you can't condone condemn the action and condemn the solution to that action. You can't say
Hmm.
that sin is wrong, but correcting that sin is also wrong. Sorry.
I no, you good.
That was that,
Uh,
and that's my, I would say, best way to break that down, because that's a very weird statement. Let's say, okay, they died. What he's essentially saying is, oh, black people and slaves died for white people to benefit. So if you take that benefit away, that's breaking what they died for. Well, if that is the case, then it should be that way,
yep.
because America is supposed to be quote unquote fair for everybody. It's supposed to be fair for everybody, but you guys are still benefiting off of something that my people did, and you are not allowing the people, the descendants of the people who built the country, to benefit off of our ancestors' work. You guys benefit off of our ancestors' work and your ancestors' work, and saying it's un-American for the descendants to benefit off of that.
It is hypocritical and paradoxical because, like you said, it's like America is the country. What do the Republicans like to say? Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Uh, Honestly, like you mentioned, like the whole theme of this has been so far. The white people didn't pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. You know, the slavers pulled themselves up. They stood on the backs of our slaves,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much. So it is a bit paradoxical, and it is uniquely un-American and American at the same time, because slavery was something that most
I
of the
have the
world partook in.
I have a number for people to call in if you guys want to call in and leave your opinions on what you believe slavery should. Uh, or you just any even if you disagree with me or Dowie, any opinion you have on reparations. If you disagree, if you do agree, you can call in and you can state your opinion. But keep going, Dowie. I just wanted to let people know why that number was on the screen.
Okay, so here comes another doozy of a one on this list. Most of my questions are coming straight from this list because it is like really outrageous that this was put out, and you can tell this guy is like a super Republican dude. Uh, what about the debt blacks owe to America? And this root, your face says it all. The root of this question comes from the belief that every part of it comes from the belief that everywhere
Can
else in
you
the, oh, we got a caller.
can you hold that question? We have a caller
Yep.
real quick. I thought you were done. That's why I opened the phone lines. But okay,
Oh, no, no problem. You're fine.
caller, can you hear? Can you hear us, caller? Can
Hello.
you hear him? Can you hear him?
Yep.
Dowie? Okay, if you can hear, you can go.
it was kind of a tricky question or something, but we definitely do. You were saying something like we got reparations and we selfish right, something like that with our ancestors, but we definitely do because we had a 500-year like disadvantage of being slaves and not building wealth and businesses that these other races have. And like I was just putting in one of my, I'm a college student, just putting in my education thing today, like about culture in class and stuff. Black history should be taught because without our history, without black people and without slaves, there would be no America today. It's just simple as that. Um, Slavery was a driving force for this new country, and it was great economic benefits for people at a new land that didn't have to pay for labor. Labor usually costs. If someone's doing it for free, well, of course you're gonna make a profit. So I was like, what do y'all think about that?
First off, I want to say that I fully agree because labor, if for people who've taken a business class, they will teach you in every single business class, labor is the most expensive part of that business. You have your cost of merchandise, cost of keeping the lights on and all that, but the labor is the most expensive part. When you have an entire country that's built off of 100% free labor, day and night free labor, and you're reaping all of the benefits from that, you're going to have a massive profit coming back to you. That you're going to say, okay, well, now I don't owe you anything because it wasn't you, but you're still benefiting from that. Like how we were saying, every single thing can be traced back. Everything America has can be traced back to the fact that it couldn't even be there without slavery. Even if it didn't start at slavery, it wouldn't exist without slavery. Because slavery is the foundation of America.
Yep, all of the founding fathers owned slaves and stuff. And I would say that I don't even think black people should pay for college because they excluded so many years from these universities and these prestigious. I go to a pretty good college, a predominantly white institution. It's like one of the best public schools in the nation, and I think more black people would go to college and take advantage of it. Just like us being slaves for 500 years should pay enough of our college. I mean, we do give like more. I mean, some people have got colleges like at some universities where slavery or were descendants of slaves, but there's not enough talk about that. They just kind of push it aside, and you got to deal with all of these white people looking at you. I'm not racist, but like you can feel uncomfortable around in a family white institution, and you building all this old stuff, and like they didn't allow us to go to school for so long. It's just like pisses me off every time.
Mm-hmm.
I see a Confederate flag or anything around this race. It just pisses me off. You can only think back so far in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
So we can't go back in time because we black.
yeah, and like or like what you have mentioned too, 100%, stuff like there's stuff outside of slavery that we need reparations for, right? For years after slavery ended, African Americans couldn't go to college, black people couldn't own businesses, black people couldn't, it's stuff like that. And there's
get patents for a lot of their inventions.
Yup. The GP black people were excluded from the GI Bill, stuff like that. There's so much more that we need reparations for outside of that. Like you mentioned, black people shouldn't have to pay for school. Black people shouldn't have to. I mean, for if you get a GI Bill, you're a descendant of slavery. You get a GI Bill. You should get more on your GI Bill because your ancestors. I mean, what are the odds that a descendant of slavery's ancestors didn't fight in any of the previous wars? Not very much, right? Can you imagine being black like during Jim Crow or slavery and not being forced to fight in that war, not being drafted? I can't imagine that. I'm pretty sure most.
Not only are you in the war, but you being called the N word and etc. by your superior commander. And what really can you do? Like you, the only black person there. I'm pretty sure they didn't want to fight in that war. I just want to say that.
Yup, exactly. So it's like the roots of how much we, not just what was built off with, but how much we were left out of that everybody else got to partake in. Uh it's huge. It's huge. And it doesn't have to be the reparations for stuff like that. They don't have to come in the form of a check. Like you said, you The government just pays for your school. You're not giving money directly to that. If anything, you would think like with the government today, because what's the biggest argument they make against reparations? Oh, you're just gonna spend it on a Corvette or a Camaro or a Mustang or something like that. Like in that form of reparations, they're not gonna do that. You're just paying their school bill.
Well, um, I agree. I agree. Reparations should come in many forms. But it's definitely got to be a check though. One
It's just
one
got to
of
be
them has
diverse,
definitely got to
right?
be. Uh huh.
It's just got to be diverse. That's it. You can't
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
know.
I believe that reparations should be diverse, but we're not cutting. We're not cutting the check out of the equation.
Yeah, yeah,
You can
no, yeah. I'm
add
not
stuff
saying that.
into it, but we're not cutting the check out. The check gotta
Yeah,
come.
yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying cut the check out. You know, I'm over here like stimulus
Bro,
check. I'm not,
what is it? $13 trillion on Afghanistan. I think they can cut us a check. We don't have to get $100,000 check. They can give us some kind of check, like free room and like something. Because the more educated black people we have, the better off we'll be in the future. Anyway, that was one of my. They don't want us to learn. They didn't want us to read because they didn't want to outsmart the white man. So
No.
that's what they insisted upon so long. I just think that we should go there for free. They've been denying us so long.
Now, caller, I wanna stress on a good point that you made.
So less people, black,
Can you
going to school at these top
can you hear me?
universities because we don't have a history like that. We couldn't go to Harvard University
Okay.
in 1700.
Caller. I just wanna
Yeah, that's all I had to say.
Okay.
I'm gonna let you guys go.
Okay. I wanted to touch on. I wanted to touch on a.
Go ahead.
I wanted to touch on a point that he made. I'm gonna let you go so more people can call in. Um, Thank you for calling. Please call back. A point that he made is America pretty much built everything, and then we were excluded from the things that our ancestors built. Like for the fact that we built the schools and the institutions and stuff like that, but then they were denying us the ability to go there. A lot of the
mm-hmm.
economy that built the businesses, we were denied the ability to get the businesses. We built the banks, but we're not. We're being the most discriminated to get bank loans. We built the medical system, but we're the most discriminated in the medical system. Everything we built, we can't partake in. We have people who are benefiting off of our work, our ancestors' work, and we're not benefiting from that at all. The telephone lines are still open if anybody else wants to call in with their opinion. But I know you were making a statement that way before the caller called in.
Yeah, the question, the crazy question that what about that Black Americans owe America? And so like I had mentioned, it goes on to say uh stuff about that. I think the number one thing this argument brings up is that slavery would have never ended if it wasn't for the white Christians who went throughout the world ending slavery. That white Christians were the first. I think both Englishmen and Americans. I think it says were the first people to promote ending of slavery in not just the U.S. but the territories they had in Africa, territories in the Caribbean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that basically that the reason that Black Americans enjoy the highest standard of living of all blacks today uh, is because of white Americans, and that we'd still be in chains if it wasn't for white Americans.
Okay. All right. Let me start off with the fact that that is utter bullshit. And I try not to curse, but I just couldn't take it. I don't know where this guy's getting this information from. White Christians are the reason. So the same white Christians. I want to know if this might be a special denomination of Christianity, because we can't be talking about the same white Christians who made Jesus white and who said that God made them a slave and that God made white people better than black people. We can't be talking about those Christians. We can't be talking about the Christians who condemn the killings and the slavery of black people, who made black people worship white people. Are we talking about a different type of Christianity? Because those are the white Christians that I knew of back in that day. One argument I hear though is okay, you have white people who were against slavery, you have white people who were trying to help the slaves out. That was such a minority. That was such a few. That was so small. It's not like it was like half was approving of slavery and half didn't like slavery. It was not that case at all. The case of the people who actually helped, and I'm not gonna put a number on it exactly because I don't really remember the number, but it was closer to about like less than 10% from my research. It was nowhere near a large amount of white people who hated slavery or who tried to fight against slavery. Issue though, issue I have is the fact that he's like, okay, well, white people did this, white people did this. First off, white people wouldn't have anything had it not been for slavery. It's not like Europe was popping. It's not like Europe was this great, beautiful, rich country. Because it's not like all of that stuff. The whole island of Europe and the British were incredibly rich. They were dirt poor. They were living in feces, and they were disgusting people before the Moors came and they taught them how to bathe. They thought that what's that thing called fleas, hair, the when the bugs are in the hair and shit.
Oh,
They thought
lice.
that lice. They thought that lice was a good thing to have. Europeans didn't really even bathe until the Moors came and taught them how to bathe. Europeans were not these incredibly sophisticated people. You can go everywhere around the world, you'll find like a pyramid or you'll find a temple or something like that of advanced architectural um, intelligence, but you won't find that in Europe. Europeans were kind of like the dumbest people. I'm gonna just be real. Slavery really benefited them more than us. Okay, it's not like Americans like, okay, well, look at what we did. We freed you guys. We freed them. That was not the case at all. Now they say, okay, well, slavery was kind of legal everywhere. Everybody had slavery. There is not one group of people in the human history, documented human history, that has had slavery that is as intense. That was as intense as the slave trade in America. That was the most brutal, inhumane, evil, demonic form of slavery human beings has ever seen before. Human beings have never seen anything as evil as that ever in life before. So to compare it to like, oh, we freed slaves here and here, no, you really didn't. America didn't want to free their slaves in America.
Exactly. Like that's the concern, right?
Yeah.
And then so to follow up, because I'm taking this uh, African history course in my this semester. One of the
Yes.
things
Let me
that
too.
we
I'm just give the number out real quick before you go. I don't know why I'm moving it. Now I'm trying to move it up. Okay, there we go. The number is 815-264-4163. Please call in and give your opinions on this topic, please. Or
yeah.
opinions or comments at all. We're taking everything.
So in
But
this,
don't
one of the
call in and
things
be
we
like, "How
went,
you doing? How was your day?" Like, have some
yeah,
sense.
yeah, just even if it's not about the topic, just call in. Just holler at a brother.
Yeah.
Uh, but one of the topics we went over, 'cause as you know, we can't really discuss the history of Africa without getting into the history of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we went over was, technically speaking, like he gives a little bit of truth in there, but in a very dishonest, disingenuous way. Like there's no good faith in what he's saying. Yes, technically speaking, what kickstarted the end of slavery, not so much in America, mostly, but not actually at all, really in America, but in like the British, the European part of the world, Northern Africa. It was technically because of the push. It was technically because of the white man, but it had nothing to do with slavery is wrong. There was no moral reason against it. Not really, not for the majority of them. It was really because there was an economic reason in there. It was costing too much money. It made more sense to free the slaves than it did to keep them enslaved because slavery had been driving the economy down. Uh, but on top of that, the argument. So not only is he disingenuous about that, it wasn't some moral reason or anything like that. Like he tries to play it off like white men were the saviors of black people, and like they were like, "This is wrong. We need to change." It wasn't like that. The other thing is that he fails to remember and even mention that they were only slaves in the first place because the white man put them in chains. So the entire thing is just dishonest right from the get go. And like I think you'll start to see that. I think you can see that with a lot of they'll tease in this some of these arguments against reparations. They'll tease a bit of a little drop of truth, and then just completely forget about it. Could double down on whatever else, whatever lies they have. Just real disingenuous, real dishonest.
Yeah. An issue I have with that too is the fact that, and I hear a lot of people make this argument. Well, white people freed the slaves. White people freed the slaves, as if white people didn't as if it was aliens who enslaved us. As if they didn't. You can't pat yourself on the back for cleaning up a mess that you made that you didn't want to clean. If I am abusive to somebody and I'm beating somebody up, if I'm a bully, I can't pat myself on the back for not bullying him any further. Like, hey, I stopped bullying. You guys should give me credit for not bullying people anymore because I stopped that. I don't bully people anymore. Well, you bully people in the beginning. Bullying people is why we're in this situation. So
Yep.
I don't like the fact that they try to make it seem as if we were just in chains when the British got here, and they was like, well, if they're in chains, we might as well see what they can do. I mean, you literally went to a country, kidnapped people, and bought them to another country, and forced them to be slaves, and for the rest of their life, in the most brutal, horrific form of slavery the world has ever seen before. So you can't pat yourself on the back for ending that atrocity when you really, and I would even give a little bit if they morally wanted to end it. But most of them didn't. And I feel like that's a big point that they missed. Oh, we ended it. They did not end that because they wanted to. Abraham Lincoln said, a quote that Abraham Lincoln said was, he did not agree with the he did not agree with the he did not agree with the I'm sorry, I was just picking up a call. He did not agree with the equality of the races, and he would see the superior position assigned to the white man. He is not Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves because he had this love for black people. He did not free the slaves because he thought slavery was wrong in any way. He did it because America was pretty much tearing apart between the North and the South. And then the South was all like, you know what? How don't we just branch our own government? Because Abraham Lincoln did ask. They agreed, okay, we need to end slavery. South didn't want to do that. And the South instead said, we're going to create our own government because we're rich enough to do that. We're going to create our own government and we're going to govern ourselves. And you guys can't say shit about our slaves. You guys leave that shit alone. So that's when Abraham Lincoln was all like, okay, well, now you can't create your own government. Now we have to have this war. He wasn't going to go to war because of slavery. He wasn't going to go to war because slavery is so wrong. We have to do this for black people. He wasn't going to do that. He went to war because they said, we're going to branch ourselves off. All of our resources, all of our power is going to be completely our own, and our slaves are going to be our own. We're not going to be governed by you anymore. That's why slavery started. It started because of the slaves, but it didn't start because the North, or Abraham Lincoln wanted to end slaves. Now, we do have a caller on the line. I just wanted to finish my statement.
All right, cool.
Caller, what's your name? Can you hold on? He said the speakers off. Hold on.
Justin.
Justin. Okay,
Yeah.
Justin. What's your comment?
I just wanted to talk about this thing about it's like Caucasian people try to use a way to make it seem like, oh, these people weren't that bad, but these college universities used to pay. College kids used to go like on Yale University and rape slaves for fun, like rape slaves women, and they try to cop out. They're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, or it was this and that, but at the end of the day, it was morally compass, evil. So it was inhumane. We weren't human to them. We're three-fifths of the human. And another thing about Abraham Lincoln, he even said in the Lincoln Douglas debate in the 1850s that he's not an abolitionist. He did not free the slaves. Like, it just happened to be so the Civil War conceded. If they like him, he really should not get as much praise as he should for Black Americans, and it's just like an over liking of Abraham Lincoln. He never was like he didn't really have an opinion about it. He wasn't pro-slave. I think he was like in between, but he wasn't about we should end slavery now. That wasn't like one of his main things to do. So he's not our hero, Black people, and it's a bunch of bullcrap about, like you were saying, like we, like Black people, we owe America. Like these people, like are really like on some meth or something. I don't know what kind of substance they're on, but that's just a bunch of bullcrap.
Now, can I make a comment on what you said about Abraham Lincoln? Because I hate the fact that anybody gives Abraham Lincoln the credit that first off, slavery technically was not illegal. It was what freed the slaves, what ended slavery, was supposed to be the 13th Amendment. Okay, that's not the Emancipation Proclamation. It's supposed to be the 13th Amendment. What they'll do is, because most people, let's be honest, most people really don't know the Constitution that well, and most people have never read the Emancipation Proclamation. I have. The Emancipation Proclamation was saying, okay, the privately owned slaves, like you're a slave for Mr. Washington or Mr. Johnson, we have to end that. But you are not a free citizen. You are not a citizen of America. That was supposed to be the 13th Amendment that did that. That was not the Emancipation Proclamation. So people giving Abraham Lincoln these big major props for being this big hero that he didn't want to do. He never wanted to be this hero that freed the slaves. He had to because of what America was facing during that time. Plus, it was a lot of Black people that freed themselves too. In the Senegalese War, Black people pretty much freed themselves from slavery in damn near the entire state of Florida. Black people were fighting off the white people, the slave catchers, because the slave catchers could not navigate their way through the terrain of Florida. Florida is like tropical and hot, and the mosquitoes and the sun. White people could not take that. So Black people were free in Florida. Black people ran to their. It's not like Black people were just these complacent group of people. Some were, but it's not like the entire group of Black people were just like, oh well, we'll just be slaves until the world ends, and we'll just be okay with that. And then Abraham Lincoln came up there, and he was all like, you know what? I don't agree with this. I'm gonna give you guys some rights, rights that you guys never really wanted, but I'm gonna give it to you guys anyway. That's not the truth. That's not the truth.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. I mean, you're right, 100% right. Everybody acts as if we should be on our, especially, that kind of ties into actually what the Republicans say. Remember, it's the Republican Party that freed the slaves. Uh, that doesn't mean anything. Like, what are we supposed to be on our knees doing you favors because you guys stopped doing the? We didn't even necessarily stop. You just signed a piece of paper that said you would. Uh, like that, it doesn't work like that. You don't get credit for stopping. You don't get credit for stopping the evil you started.
Mm-hmm. Another thing too, when people talk about no, it's the Republican Party that did this. It's the Republican Party that did this. They don't want to talk about the fact that the Republican Party back during that day was damn near completely different than it is
They're
during
better
today.
than the Democrats.
They had a what is a political switch. So
Hmm.
what the Republicans stood for today would technically associate that more with the Democrats than you would with the current Republicans. So when Republicans make the argument, someone like, well, it was the Democrats that started the KKK. Well, that doesn't help your argument because most of the KKK is Republicans actually today.
Yep.
Most of the people who have an issue with reparations are Republicans today.
True.
If slavery was so bad, if people wanted to act like slavery, if Abraham Lincoln and all these northern white people has such an issue with slavery, which they didn't. A lot of the Union members killed the black soldiers after the Civil War was won. But if they had such an issue, why didn't they do anything about Jim Crow, about segregation, about the lynchings, and about everything else? Black people damn near went right back to slavery for the government with the 13th Amendment and that little clause, that little loophole saying that if you're a prisoner, you're technically enslaved. You're technically a slave. So black people went straight back to the plantations after the Emancipation Proclamation, and they never say anything about that.
Call if you had something you want to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, this kind of has to do with the perception of like slavery. As far as like this image of black people, how they are, like, we're the most violent people. Actually, the most violent people in history are white people. They killed millions of Indians with disease. They colonized Africa. At one point, Africa, like 90, I think only maybe one or two countries were controlled by, most of them were controlled by European countries. Some were controlled by like Spain and stuff, but these are the most violent people. And we always get that bad rap. Black people are violent. They go to jail. You should be wary of them. You shouldn't be acting around them. But these black, like the white people, are really the most violent, tortured, murderous people in history. They've killed the most people.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they killed more people than any other race ever.
Mm-hmm.
By conquering land and etc. And that just never gets pointed out. How they didn't murder millions of Indians with diseases and killed Africans and took all their gold and exported their resources and let them to dry die. That's why Africans so much country now.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did slavery hurt us, but the colonization. They took away diamonds or some material people needed to survive and resources,
Mm-hmm.
and exported it back to London and UK and the motherland. And it's still crippling Africa today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, to comment on your comment, when people talk about the slavery, when white people talk about it, they make it seem like, yeah, the slave masters, they would come out if you weren't picking cotton fast enough. And black people did way more than picking cotton. Picking cotton was the biggest thing that built the wealth, but black people did everything. As far as building the railroads, they want to give that to the Asians. Black people built the railroads before they came and expanded it. But black people built the buildings, built the White House, built everything. Okay? The like how he's saying about the evils that white people have done, and how we keep talking about how, okay, well, everybody had slaves or whatever. The brutality of American slavery is so unlike anything else. You don't hear stories of the African slaves kicking the heads off of babies, or feeding babies to alligators for live bait. You don't hear stories of even the slavery that was in Africa. You don't hear stories of that. You don't hear stories of just like open brutal rape. White people used to rape black women as a sport. It was like fun to them. It was no problem at all. This was before slavery, centuries after slavery. All these horrific, evil stories of slavery you don't hear anywhere else. Yeah, you used to, and even slavery back in the day, that was more of a indentured servitude than it really was slavery, because you would work for your however long, and most of them were due to the fact that, okay, you were a prisoner of a battle or war or something. You would work for however long, then you would go to your family, but you would have to come back the next day because it was a debt that you would have to pay off. That's largely what it was.
That's like
You're working for your entire life, and if you have children, your children belong to me, and they're working for their entire life. That was unheard of.
Again,
That was
that's like one
mainly
of the biggest differences between the sub-Saharan slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade.
yeah, exactly. And the brutality, the fact that they would have a game where they would bury people in the alive up to their neck, and they would take turns kicking out their heads, and this would be babies, and until they would kick the heads off of babies. They would kick the heads off of black babies. They would years of slave where they would mention they would rape whatever. Their rape wasn't like a I'm trying to sneak and do it. They would do that sometimes because they didn't want their white wife to find out that they were having sex or raping their black slaves. But they would openly rape black men. They would rape black men. They would buck break black men. They would hang and torture. They would burn people alive. Like I said, eating people. You don't have stories. They want to talk about how black people are savages, Africans are savages and stuff. You don't have any stories comparable to American slavery. None at all. All of the wealth that was built, that literally built the foundation for every person living in America, is built based off of slavery, off of the slavery of America. And they are okay with that because they benefit from that. They're totally fine with it. They don't want to give it up. If they have an issue, if you killed, like let's say if somebody killed my dad, and my dad, if somebody killed my dad and they took the money that I was supposed to inherit and they gave it to their kid, and I would say, okay, well, find out that that was my dad's money that your dad stole, and that money belongs to me. It would be a lie to say, okay, well, you know what? I feel bad for the fact that my dad killed your dad and stole his money. I really, really do, but I'm not giving this money back. Would you believe that they really feel bad? Would you believe that they really feel like what their father did was wrong? Which is why I still believe to this day is clearly evident that most white people do not have a problem with slavery like they say they do. They probably don't want to see it or think about it, but they don't really have a huge issue with it. You can't have an issue with a problem and also have an issue with the solution to the problem. You can't.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like, they're not for the, like you mentioned, all the horrific stuff, the rapings, the murders, the lynchings, the killings. But at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, I'm sitting in this, I got this, I'm sitting in this pile of gold from all that. I'm not gonna give it up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, again, to mention that Thor Ragnarok movie. Proud of ashamed of how you got it, but proud to have it.
Yeah, that's mostly what they're like. And these are the arguments that and I'm doing this for my audience, so it can be a learning lesson when they talk about reparations. Okay, well, everybody had slaves. Okay, well, this isn't about everybody. I'm not trying to get reparations from everybody. I'm trying to
Yep.
get reparations from you guys. Anytime you hear everybody had slaves, that's deflecting. That's, well, what about them too? It's not a what about them too. It's about the fact that you're benefiting from slavery that happened. Whether your ancestors owned slaves, because everybody who just because you didn't own the slave, don't mean you didn't participate in being um, in slavery. You had slave watchers, slave catchers. So it's not like just because you didn't actually own the slave didn't belong to you. You didn't participate in slavery. The police force started from slavery. They used to be the slave patrol, the slave catchers, and now they're the police force. So it just because you didn't own a slave doesn't mean you don't have a debt to pay. America has a debt to pay, and by the fact that you are living in America and you benefit from America and you want to be a citizen of America, then you are attaching yourself to that debt. You're attaching yourself to the debt that America owes Foundation of Black Americans, and that's just simple. I don't want to hear the whole my people didn't do this. I really and here's something that they stress too, and Jane Elliott brings this up all the time. Well, what about the Native Americans? Well, the Native Americans owe a debt too. If we're gonna be doing that, the Native Americans owe a debt too, because instead of helping to end slavery, Native Americans, and this is documented, participated in the red Native Americans participated in slavery. And if you want to give them something, you have to include us too, because black people have been here centuries before. Even this is documented. This isn't no conspiracy theory. Centuries before the British came with the slave trade. So if you want to give something to the Native Americans, you would have to give it to black people as well. It is time that black people realize we need to be um, we need justice for what has for the wrong doings that have happened to us. We cannot allow these other groups of people to kind of leapfrog over us. So when they bring up, okay, black people, now we got to bring up Native Americans. But no time ever when they bring up Native Americans do they go to black people. No time ever when you bring up any other group do you kind of say, well, what about black people? But every single time you bring up black people, you have to include another group. Well, what about them too? And since we can't do right by everybody, even though we really only should be doing right by the most aggrieved people, then we can't. Why even try to do right? Why even try to do justice? That's wrong. I believe that's wrong. Well, um,
Yeah.
that is, I would say that's it for the questioning. Gonna keep this, turn that right here off. Thank you, caller, Justin. Thank you, Justin, for calling and giving us your opinions. We're gonna have this, the call thing again. We got it figured out now. So you guys can
Yep.
call in, leave your opinions, leave your questions or whatever. Uh, I will let Dowie, I will let you have your final say and shout out to any social media you have.
All
Audience,
right.
thank you for coming. Thank you for leaving a like. I see the likes are pretty good. So thank you for coming. Thank you for watching and leaving a like. Now you can go.
All right. So all these statements, I just want to reiterate again. I think I did a initially when I planned to do this, I planned to leave out my outsider voice and kind of just, initially intended to make the argument as if I'm against reparations, but after seeing a lot of those, when I started doing the research for these questions, I couldn't really stomach doing that. Like even pretending that these were my arguments, I couldn't really stomach that. Especially those last two questions; those were kind of wild, and kind of shows you the depravity and insanity of a lot of people to defend what they have. Uh, and like I think that's really the biggest trap with a lot of these people. It's that they don't with a lot of these people, like the guy who wrote this paper, he'll he'll it's not that he cares if you make it or not, right? He might say, "Yeah, I want you to make it too," but the thing is, he doesn't want to lose what he has, which would be just in order to, give us, our people, a fair chance. And these are a lot of the arguments that are against reparations. It's that I'm not willing to take away from myself to make up for the whole that the founding of the society has given to you. And it really comes from a sense of selfishness because if you really, you can't call yourself a patriot or even a nationalist, God forbid, if you don't want to see your country as a whole succeed. Like you're not really a patriot. You're just a selfish individual. That's all you are. You don't care about the country as a whole. So really, to be against reparations is to be against America. Honestly, to be against your fellow Americans. So I would recommend that everybody watching, go out, look up for papers that are against reviews. Just remember that are against reparations. Just review them, read them over, see the arguments that people make, because then you arm yourself. The best way to win a war is to know what the enemy is going to do before they do it. That is your best way the best thing you can have in any type of battle. You properly prepare yourself, you win. Those who fail to plan to fail. I'm not really going to shout out my social media this time, but make sure you subscribe, hit those likes, stay busy in the comments too.
Another statement I would like to make. People ask why. Why is it so important? Like, why do you hear people argue that we shouldn't get reparations? Why do they care? Why do they care that we get reparations? because they know what America was founded on. And like I said, slavery, which is what America was founded on, is founded on the distribution of wealth solely, almost 100%, to white society. And they know that that is why they get their opportunities. That is why they have their businesses. That is why they live a better life collectively than black society. And they know that because black people are denied capital. This is a capitalistic nation. And capital is frozen in white society. And you growing up white and you benefiting from that capital, and black people aren't. So if you take that capital and you, even if you fairly give it to black people, then you're going to start to lose that, because black people are going to rise way faster than you guys, than white people. So what they're doing is they don't want black people to have reparations, because they know reparations will give black people the tools, the capital, to exceed past white people. And white people don't want black people exceeding past them. That's the whole thing. White people do not want black people exceeding past them, and they know reparations will arm black people with the ability to do that. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for liking. Please leave comments. If you're watching this back again, please leave a comment on what you think. Thank you, caller. Thank you, Justin. You can follow me on my social media. I'm on Instagram at J_Elite10. That's in the description. And Twitter at J_Elite10. If you guys have any video recommendations, anything like that, you guys can hit me up on either the comments. I'm active on the comments, or you can hit me up on my social media too. You guys can watch my other lives and my other videos. That's really blowing up, getting a lot of attention too. So you guys should see what all the fuss is about. Coming soon, I plan on having some merchandise. So I got to come up with like exactly what I'm going to do, because right now I'm thinking about having like a giveaway thing for like my most loyal subscribers, my day one folks. I'm having like a giveaway to you guys. So